What's your name?
My name is Nino, short of Ninoslav.
What exactly was your goal in documenting the conflict in Kosovo?
I dedicated myself to that goal of collecting as much information as I can, and I was kind of partial about the things that were happening in Kosovo, and then with the hope that more people see it, less possible it'll be that that thing is just ignored. Of course, there must have been some kind of naivety on my part, or I don't know what, or maybe it has to be like that. But I kind of didn't understand that nothing would change. I thought if people knew about it, something would happen. Now I'm thinking maybe I would not supposed to have this maturity in me, because then I would not be able to do these documentaries.
You wouldn't have done anything.
I would not have done anything. So I had to be in that way blinded by that fact in order to produce all this footage and to go there and to have motivation. That's the way I see it. Anyway, during these years, I've become aware of American dream, or of why I would rather live in the States than anywhere else. Like in a very bizarre way, because at the same time, I mean, in my efforts to show my movies to the largest possible audience that took me all over the world, the lucky break happened in the States first. Sometime 2001, I was allowed to show and invited to show some of this footage in Columbia University, Harriman Institute, later to other universities, respectable institutions. So I ended up showing it in every kind of important instance in the States, at the universities, at the Congress, at the Senate, at the National Press Center. In all these years, it was easier for me to show movies in the States than to show them in Serbia, because here at least, and that's maybe something from my point of view, here, even though politically it wasn't acceptable, if it's presented in a certain way, because my movies didn't go into politics, just simply showing what's happening in certain locations and what time, if it's presented in a certain way, no matter what it is, it'll be allowed to be seen if it's done in any kind of acceptable manner, technologically speaking, or I don't know what. So it was easier to show the failure of the international community in Kosovo in the States or in some countries in Western Europe than as it was the case in Serbia, because in Serbia it went on and on. Whoever was in the power in Serbia had to, ignore human rights violation in Kosovo. Why? Because when the nationalist government of Mr. Koštunica, with his close connection with Russia, was in power for 8 years after Milosevic, the territorial integrity was seen as something more important than the human rights, these values. Because if you talk about human rights, it means that you're not talking about territorial integrity, and for them, territorial integrity of Serbia, that means protecting Kosovo to be the part of Serbia, ignoring that 2 million Albanians don't want to live in Serbia, is more important than to say how crucially these Serbs in Kosovo are jeopardized. Why? Because then you'll have to ask and answer what happened with the money, because that went down there to help the Serbs. Because there was a lot of money, some kind of $12 billion that Serbia spent helping Kosovo's Serbs. But unfortunately, these people did not see most of that money. That money disappeared in pockets of the Serbian officials and of whoever else was there. So if you dig deep into the jeopardized human being, you will see that Serbian government is really doing patriotic thing. So don't show it for them. Like, better talk about territorial integrity. That's historically part of Serbia.
If you dig too deep, you might uncover where
you're
the
uncovering
other
failure
enemies.
of the fellow Serb to be concerned by the destiny of his fellow Serb in Kosovo. Basically, intellectuals, for the same reason, afraid for their own careers, would not develop that idea.
Were the politicians aware of all the problems in Kosovo?
So they are aware of this issue. Of course, it's not like they're not aware of it, but they're not really interested in ever solving it, really, as much as they're interested in staying in power and basically destroying the country without really seeing it that way. Because what we are having now, right as we speak, is now it's again crucial thing for Serbia. If Serbia does not recognize in some clear way that Kosovo is independent, Serbia will not be able to join the European Union. And now, of course, these days are coming in a month or so, there'll have to be found some modus vivendi, and Serbia does it. So that opens up a whole issue, you know, by not seeing your own fault, as I said at the beginning, by not confronting your own misdoing, your own, in our case, without admitting that we really didn't care about religion, that we didn't care about government, about history, about each other, that all we really cared was like some kind of combination that will make us personally rich or wealthy, or happy in some ways, or there will be no moving forward. So to come back to that point, so in America I could present it, and I even were capable enough to raise funds to produce several DVD editions, like of these movies. I don't know. This is the last one that was basically printed here in New York and was presented at the United Nations and was used and shown like in over 160 countries all over the world. And speaking of that, like it was in a funny way, America proved that something is possible. If an ordinary citizen wants to dedicate his 12 years of his life and his resources into recording something that is really happening, and if that's what's really happening, in any way interesting, they'll show it. And by showing that, in this case, that kind of accidental citizen has a better archive than the Serbian government, then basically in its own way it shows that the Serbian government didn't really care about the people. Because if it did, I mean people in Kosovo, it would have had a better archive of the destruction of people and churches than this accidental citizen.
What kind of media archive did the government have?
So government didn't do pretty much anything about building up a media archive, which was what I was rooting for, hoping that the larger our media action is, better our chances are that maybe that part of the problem will be solved in some ways, more acceptable. Tomorrow you could have independent Kosovo, but where minority rights is not just a little thing written on the paper, but real thing that's being monitored and this and that way. I don't know.
How big is the Serbian minority in Kosovo?
Oh, right now, with all the things that's happening, they don't even know the right number. They're operating with numbers of like, I don't know, 100,000 maybe. But numbers, and there are about 1.8 million Albanians. But the thing is, 250,000 people who have been expelled in 1999 could not return to Kosovo. And that's not also something that's an issue that people discuss too much. And part of my footage is dedicated to these refugees and their destinies. And I recorded footage from most of their camps, showing different conditions they live in and the reasons why they're there where they are.